What's something you did as a child to protect your parent, even though it wasn't your job? I was 7 years old the first time I picked up broken glass without telling anyone. It was a Tuesday, I think. My dad had just left for work, and the house was so quiet you could hear the fridge humming. My mom was lying on the couch with her arm over her face, the TV blaring static because the remote had slipped under the cushion again and she couldn't be bothered to find it. I went into the kitchen to get a juice box and saw it, the shattered glass on the floor, sharp little teeth glinting in the sunlight that cut through the dusty blinds. A cup had fallen. I don't know when. Maybe she knocked it over in one of her stumbling walks to the sink. Maybe it had been there since last night. All I knew was that if my dad came home and saw it, he'd yell. Not at her. At me. Because I should have been watching her. Because I should have cleaned up. Because everything was my responsibility, somehow, even when I didn't understand why. I knelt down and started picking up the pieces with my bare hands, moving slowly so they wouldn't clink too loud. I knew that sound, the sound of something breaking, and I knew what it did to him. My fingers bled a little, not a lot, just a few thin red lines that I wiped on my pajama pants and kept going. I wrapped the pieces in paper towels and buried them deep in the trash, then sprayed the floor with water and wiped it with the towel we used for dishes. I didn't say a word. Not to her. Not to anyone. I just cleaned, checked the floor with my fingertips one last time to make sure it was safe, and went back to my room. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel scared. I felt proud. Like I had done something important. Like I had stopped something terrible from happening. And maybe I had. Maybe I did prevent the yelling, the door slamming, the accusations that felt like punches. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a job. A quiet, thankless job that I didn't apply for but had somehow inherited. From that day on, I became the sweeper of glass, the fixer of messes, the absorber of blame. If she forgot to do laundry and he screamed about his work shirts not being clean, I ran to the washer and did it myself. If she was passed out when it was time to make dinner, I microwaved frozen waffles and called it a meal. If she cried in the bathroom with the door locked, I sat outside with my back against the wall, whispering, "It's okay, I'm here," until the silence got heavy again. And I never told anyone. Because how do you tell someone that your whole childhood was built around preventing your father's temper from landing on your mother, and when it couldn't, it landed on you? How do you say that your idea of love was watching someone self-destruct and trying to cover the evidence before anyone noticed? That day with the broken glass wasn't a one-time thing, it was the first time I understood what it meant to protect someone who was supposed to be protecting me. And I carried that understanding like a secret badge of honor, never realizing it was actually a chain wrapped tight around my childhood, one I'd spend years trying to untangle. I was 8 the first time I lied to my school about being sick. It wasn't a cold or a stomachache, but I told them it was both. I had practiced my voice in the mirror that morning, soft, raspy, just enough of a croak to sound convincing. I even splashed water on my forehead so it would glisten like sweat. My mom hadn't gotten up that day. She'd come home late the night before, stumbling and mumbling about someone named Marcus and how he didn't understand her. I didn't know who that was. I didn't ask. She collapsed on the couch with a half-empty bottle of something that wasn't apple juice, and I had covered her with the itchy blanket we kept for guests, the one with cigarette burns and dog hair stuck in the fibers. When I woke up for school, she hadn't moved. Her mouth was open, dry. One shoe was still on. I stood over her for a long time, waiting for her to wake up, to say anything, to tell me what to do. But she didn't. And I couldn't leave her like that. What if she choked? What if Dad came home early and saw her like this? What if, God forbid, something worse happened and I wasn't there? So I called the school myself. Said my mom was sick. Said I was staying home to take care of her. The secretary didn't even ask to speak with an adult. She just said, "Feel better, sweetie," and hung up. That was the moment I realized no one was really watching. No one was going to knock on our door. No one was going to come check. I was a child, and the world already trusted me to be my own guardian. That day, I microwaved 2 slices of bread and called it breakfast. I sat by the couch with my knees pulled to my chest and watched cartoons with the volume low. Every 10 minutes I checked to make sure she was still breathing. Her chest rose, fell, rose again. I didn't know what alcohol poisoning was, but part of me suspected that's what this might be. Her breath smelled like fruit and something sour. I didn't touch the bottle. I just watched. Around noon, she stirred. Looked at me. Her mascara was smudged like bruises under her eyes. "Why aren't you at school?" She slurred. "You were sick," I whispered. "I stayed to help." She blinked slowly, then rolled over. That was it. No thank you. No hug. No explanation. Just rolled over like I was a dog curled at her feet. And I stayed there. Because it felt like if I left, something terrible would happen. That became the first of many sick days. Each time, I got better at lying. Better at pretending everything was fine. At school, I told people my mom worked nights. That's why she was tired all the time. I said she was a nurse. Or a waitress. Or something noble. Anything but what she really was, a woman disappearing one drink at a time. No one questioned me. Not the teachers. Not the neighbors. Not even the other kids. And part of me hated that. Because even though I was hiding it, I wanted someone to notice. I wanted someone to say, "This isn't right." But no one ever did. And so, I kept waking up early to check her breathing. I kept skipping field trips because I didn't want to leave her alone. I kept lying to everyone about how close we were, how funny she was, how creative. And each time I told those stories, it was like building a house on sand, one more layer of fiction to protect the fragile truth buried underneath. That I was a child. And I was terrified. And no one knew. Because I had become so good at pretending I was fine that even I started to believe it. I was 9 the first time I saw my father push my mother against the kitchen wall, and it changed something in me that never quite changed back. It was late, maybe close to midnight, and I had gotten out of bed because I heard the sound of dishes clattering, something heavy falling, and then the kind of silence that wasn't silence at all. It was the inhale before something terrible. I crept down the hallway barefoot, pressing myself against the cold plaster wall like that might make me invisible. The kitchen light was on, harsh and yellow, casting long shadows across the linoleum floor. I could see them, my dad with his fists clenched, my mom with her hands shaking, holding a half-empty bottle of wine like it was a weapon or a shield, maybe both. They weren't yelling anymore. That was over. This was the quiet part, the dangerous part. He was saying something low and fast, something I couldn't quite hear, and she kept saying, "It wasn't a big deal, calm down," like those words ever worked on him. Then she reached for his arm, and he shoved her, hard, into the wall, and the sound her body made when it hit the plaster was louder than any scream. I didn't think. I didn't calculate. I just reacted. "Stop it!" I screamed, my voice high and cracked and useless. Both of their heads snapped toward me. My mom's lip was bleeding, just barely. My dad's face changed in an instant, from rage to something colder. Controlled. Like a curtain had dropped. He didn't say anything. He just walked toward me slowly, and I wanted to run, but my feet wouldn't move. I remember gripping the edge of the hallway wall so tightly that my fingers ached. He stopped in front of me, towering, and for a second I thought he was going to hit me. But he didn't. He leaned down and whispered, "Go back to bed." I nodded. I didn't speak. I didn't breathe. I just turned and walked as quickly and quietly as I could back to my room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of my bed with my heart pounding so hard it made my vision blurry. I didn't cry until I heard him slam the front door and leave. Then I sobbed into my pillow, not because I was scared, I already knew fear, but because I realized my voice had no power here. I had screamed to protect her, and it did nothing. And worse, when I looked into her eyes that night, there wasn't gratitude. There was blame. Pure, sharp blame. Like I had made it worse by witnessing it. Like my presence was the crack in the mask she wore so carefully, and now she had to find a way to glue it back together. The next morning, everything was normal. She made pancakes. He didn't come home until noon. No one talked about the fight. Not the wall. Not the bruise. Not my scream. And that was the lesson. In this house, silence wasn't just survival, it was expectation. I never yelled again. I never interfered. I became a watcher, a listener, a silent archivist of things that weren't supposed to be seen. And over time, I stopped even letting myself think the words, "This is wrong." Because the second you start thinking it's wrong, you have to decide what to do about it. And I already knew, I was too small, too scared, too alone to do anything. So instead, I folded the moment up like a dirty note and hid it deep inside myself, hoping it would stay buried. It didn't. After the night he pushed her into the wall, I started watching everything more closely, every sound, every glance, every bottle. I wasn't stupid. I knew alcohol had always been part of our lives. I could recognize the smell in her breath before I even understood what it was. But after that night, I became obsessed. I started finding her stashes. Behind the detergent in the laundry room. Inside a cereal box in the pantry. Underneath the bathroom sink, wrapped in a towel like a secret baby. At first, I didn't know what to do. I'd stare at them, afraid to touch them, afraid that somehow if I did, she'd know and blame me. But then one night I watched her stumble into her room and collapse sideways across the bed without even taking her shoes off, and I thought, what if she doesn't wake up one day? What if she chokes on her own breath and no one's here to help? What if I find her dead? And suddenly, the fear of leaving the bottles was greater than the fear of touching them. So I started throwing them away. One at a time. Quietly. I'd bury them in the outside trash under coffee grounds and old food, hoping no one would notice. I made it a game, how stealthy I could be, how fast. I thought maybe if she didn't see the alcohol, she wouldn't drink. Maybe it would be that simple. Maybe she was just looking for an excuse. I didn't tell anyone. Not even Noah. This was my mission. My secret way of fixing the family. But one night, everything fell apart. I had just tossed one of the vodka bottles into the outside bin when I came back in and saw my dad standing by the back door, holding something in his hand. It was a bottle cap. I don't know where he found it. Maybe I'd been sloppy. Maybe the universe had just decided to punish me for trying too hard. He looked at me and didn't say anything. That was the worst part, how quiet he always got when he was mad. His face didn't move, but I could see it in his jaw. "Did you throw something away?" He finally asked. I froze. "No," I lied. "Just garbage." He walked past me, opened the trash bin, dug through it with his bare hands, and pulled the bottle out like a magician pulling a rabbit from a hat. I didn't breathe. He turned to me and asked again, "Did you throw this away?" I didn't know what to say. I could have told the truth. That I was scared for her. That I wanted to protect her. That I thought maybe I could make things better. But all I did was stare at the ground and say, "I'm sorry." He didn't hit me. He didn't yell. He just grabbed my arm so hard I thought something might snap and drag me back inside. My mom was in the kitchen, swaying slightly, and when she saw the bottle in his hand, she flinched. "She's been messing with your things," he said, throwing me forward. "Trying to play games." My mother didn't defend me. She didn't say I was just a kid or that I didn't understand. She just looked at me like I was a traitor. Like I had embarrassed her. "Why would you do that?" she asked, and her voice cracked, not from sadness, but from shame. That night, I cried under my blanket until I couldn't breathe. I felt like I had betrayed everyone. Like my attempt to help had exposed something I wasn't supposed to see. I stopped hiding the bottles after that. I stopped interfering. I watched her drink and just counted how many she had. I learned her moods by the slur of her voice. I could tell when it was going to be a good night or a dangerous one by the brand of the bottle. I cataloged it all like a scientist. Detached. Silent. Powerless. Because that's what they taught me. In this house, help is betrayal. And children are only safe when they stay small, invisible, and obedient. I was 10 the first time I wore a hoodie in the middle of summer to hide a bruise that stretched like a fingerprint across my upper arm. It was dark purple, like rotten fruit, and shaped like something I didn't want to name. I remember looking at it in the mirror, poking it gently, watching how slow the color returned to my skin. It didn't hurt as much as it should have. Maybe I had gotten used to pain. Maybe my body had already started to numb itself. Either way, I knew I couldn't let anyone see it. School was starting again, and the thought of someone asking questions filled me with a panic I couldn't explain. So I dug out my oldest, baggiest sweatshirt and told myself it was worth the sweat if it meant no one would notice. On the school bus, someone teased me for dressing like it was winter. I laughed and said I like being cozy. The lie tasted sour, but it worked. No one asked again. In gym class, I faked a stomachache to skip changing in front of the other girls. I told the nurse I felt dizzy. She pressed a cold thermometer to my forehead and nodded, uninterested. Everyone believed me, because I had always been the responsible one, the quiet one, the good girl. And good girls don't get hurt at home. Good girls don't need help. Good girls smile and say, everything's fine, even when they're bleeding on the inside. I became an expert in that smile. I wore it like armor. At recess, when someone asked why I never had playdates at my house, I said my parents were strict. When a teacher noticed the dark circles under my eyes, I said I was studying a lot. When a counselor once gently asked if I ever felt unsafe, I said, oh no, my mom just gets really tired sometimes. And she smiled. She smiled and nodded like that was an answer. That moment marked something in me. I realized adults didn't want the truth. They wanted reassurance. They wanted neat stories. They wanted to believe that kids like me didn't exist in their classrooms, in their neighborhoods. And so I gave it to them. I gave them all the performance they needed to keep pretending. But inside, I was starting to break in quiet ways. I found myself flinching when people raised their voices, even if they weren't talking to me. I avoided eye contact. I apologized for things I hadn't done. I started biting the inside of my cheek until it bled because it was a pain I could control. And the worst part? I started believing it was all my fault. That maybe if I had been better, quieter, faster, smarter, none of this would have happened. That maybe the bruises were warnings. Lessons. That maybe I was the problem. I remember one day, during art class, we were told to draw our families. Everyone else sketched smiling stick figures and sunny skies. I drew a house with no windows. No people. Just shadows behind the door. My teacher looked at it and said, that's a little dark, don't you think? I shrugged. It's just a drawing. She didn't ask anything else. I wanted her to. I wanted someone, anyone, to pull me aside and say, tell me the truth. I can handle it. But no one did. And so I kept wearing the hoodie. Kept writing fake notes when my mom forgot to sign field trip forms. Kept staying home on sick days to make sure she didn't choke on her sadness. I became the scaffolding of a house that was crumbling from the inside out. And no one noticed. Or maybe they did and chose not to see. And honestly, that hurt more. I turned 10 on a Tuesday, which felt important for some reason, 2 digits, a real birthday, a milestone. In the week leading up to it, I kept waiting for someone to say something, to mention plans, a cake, anything at all. But no one did. My mom was in one of her quiet phases, where she barely spoke and only got up to smoke on the porch or pour more wine into whatever cup was closest. My dad had been working late every night, or maybe he wasn't working, maybe he was just avoiding the house, like I wished I could. I had saved a page in my school planner for the date, circling it in purple marker with a little star, just in case my teacher noticed. She didn't. No one did. The day came, and I woke up early, heart pounding, expecting something, balloons, pancakes, a card left on the table, but the kitchen was empty. There were no voices, no smell of breakfast. Just the faint sound of the news playing from the living room and the soft clink of a bottle against glass. I tiptoed in, hoping maybe I'd see her with something, anything. But she was asleep, half slumped on the couch, drooling slightly, mascara smudged down her cheek. She hadn't even made it to bed. My dad's car was gone. I stared at her for a long time. I wanted to wake her. I wanted to shake her and yell, it's my birthday, like that would mean something. But I didn't. I just stood there, waiting for the sadness to pass, but it didn't. So I went back into the kitchen, climbed up on the counter, and pulled out a box of pancake mix we had bought months ago. It was expired, but I didn't care. I followed the directions as best I could. The batter came out lumpy and too thin. I poured it into the skillet and nearly burned it, but I managed to make a small, misshapen pancake. I put it on a paper plate, added a candle I found in the drawer under the sink, one of those cheap white ones you use during power outages, and carried it to my room. I lit the candle with a match, closed the door, sat on the floor in front of my mirror, and sang happy birthday to myself in a whisper. My voice cracked halfway through, and I had to stop to wipe my eyes. I sang it again anyway. Quietly. Just to hear it. Just to make it real. I blew out the candle and made a wish I never told anyone, please, don't let me grow up to be like her. I ate the pancake even though it was dry and stuck to the roof of my mouth. It was the only birthday meal I'd get. Later that day, my dad came home and asked what I had done all day. I told him nothing special, and he grunted. That was the moment I knew for sure they had forgotten. Completely. No one said the words happy birthday to me that year. Not once. I didn't get a hug. Or a gift. Or even a text from a cousin. And what hurt most wasn't the forgetting, it was how easy it was for them. How seamlessly I slipped through the cracks in their world. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if I would remember this day forever. I told myself maybe next year would be different. Maybe someone would remember. But part of me already knew the truth. I had been erased from their story long before I could even write my own. And so I held on to that moment in the mirror, my own reflection singing to me, because at least someone had shown up. Even if it was just me. By the time I turned 11, I had run out of places to put the things I couldn't say out loud. My mind was full of half-spoken fears, rehearsed conversations that never happened, silent screams swallowed before they reached my throat. So I started writing them down. It began with a few pages torn from my school notebooks, small, cramped letters about the day my mother broke a glass and made me clean it up while calling me ungrateful, or how my father's silence at dinner sometimes felt louder than a slap. I hid the pages in an old shoebox under my bed, thinking maybe if I could trap the thoughts somewhere, they wouldn't rot inside me. Eventually, I bought a diary at the dollar store with leftover lunch money. It was pink with fake gemstones on the cover, the kind that fell off if you scratched them too hard. I didn't care how it looked. It was mine. And every night, after everyone was asleep or passed out, I would write. I wrote about how I felt invisible, how sometimes I wished I could vanish completely, how I couldn't remember the last time someone asked if I was okay and actually meant it. I wrote about the bruises, the lies I told teachers, the way my mom's perfume mixed with alcohol and made my stomach twist. I wrote about how I knew too much for a kid my age, how I hated knowing what hangovers looked like, or how to tell if a grown-up was lying. Writing became the only space where I was honest. It didn't judge me, didn't interrupt me, didn't call me dramatic. I poured everything into that little book. One night, I wrote, sometimes I think I was born just to carry other people's pain. I didn't even cry when I wrote it. I just stared at the sentence, then closed the book and slid it under my pillow. The next morning, I came home from school and knew instantly that something was wrong. The air in the house felt thick, like the walls were holding their breath. I dropped my backpack and walked into the kitchen, where my mom stood at the table with my diary in her hand. Open. Pages folded back. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes were sharp, cutting. "What is this?" she asked, her voice low. My stomach dropped. I felt like I was going to throw up. "It's just writing," I said quickly. "Just stuff." She slammed the book on the table. "You are telling people I hit you? That I'm a drunk?" "No. I didn't tell anyone. It's private, just for me. You made me look like a monster," she snapped. "You think your life is hard? You think I don't have problems too?" I couldn't speak. My throat closed up. My feet were frozen in place. She grabbed the diary and ripped out a page, crumpling it in her fist. Then another. Then another. She tore them one by one, until the book was a pile of shredded confessions on the kitchen floor. I watched her do it. I didn't beg her to stop. I didn't cry. I just stood there, watching years of silence being shredded into nothing. When she was done, she looked at me with disgust and said, "You are lucky I don't show this to your father." That hit harder than anything else. Because I knew what that meant. I knew exactly what that would trigger. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling again, only this time I didn't dream of birthdays or wishes. I dreamed of fire. I dreamed of burning every piece of myself she couldn't tolerate, every thought, every word, every part that made her uncomfortable. And somewhere deep down, I promised myself I'd never write again. I kept that promise for years. Because the one safe place I had, my mind, had been breached. And when the person you're trying to protect turns around and makes you feel like the villain for needing to speak, you learn the most dangerous lesson of all: your truth is not allowed. Only theirs is. I was 12 when I finally broke the rule and called for help. It was a Wednesday afternoon and I had come home from school to find the door unlocked and the living room in total silence, no TV, no radio, not even the usual sound of my mom sighing or pacing or slamming drawers in search of something that didn't exist. I found her in the kitchen, collapsed on the floor, half curled like a question mark next to an open bottle of vodka and a broken plate that looked like it had fallen from the counter. For a few seconds, I just stood there, frozen. Not with fear, I was too used to that, but with calculation. What do I do? If I call Dad, he'll blame me. If I call no one, what if she dies? I knelt down, touched her shoulder, and whispered her name. Nothing. Her skin was warm but clammy. Her breath was shallow. Her lips were cracked and pale. Something in me clicked, not panic, but focus. I grabbed the house phone, my hands shaking, and dialed 911 for the first time in my life. "My mom isn't waking up," I told them. "She was drinking. I think she passed out." The operator asked for the address. I gave it. She told me to stay calm and stay on the line. I said okay, but I had already put the phone down. I went back to her, adjusted the pillow under her head, wiped the blood from her lip with a dish rag, and then waited. I don't remember how long it took, 5 minutes, 10, maybe more. When the EMTs arrived, I opened the door and stepped aside like it was a scene I had rehearsed. They moved fast, asking questions I didn't want to answer. "How long was she unconscious? Has she done this before? Do you know what she drank?" I said I didn't know. I said I found her like that. I said maybe it was her blood sugar. I lied. I lied like it was breathing. One of the medics, a woman with kind eyes and tired shoulders, crouched down beside me and asked, "Do you feel safe at home?" I looked her straight in the face and said, "Yes, I'm just scared." It was the perfect answer. Honest enough to sound true. vague enough to shut down deeper questions. They took her away on a stretcher. I wasn't allowed to ride in the ambulance. I stayed behind and waited for Dad. When he came home and found the mess, he didn't even look at me. Just muttered, "What did you do now?" Like her collapse had somehow been my fault. I didn't respond. I went to my room, sat on the edge of my bed, and stared at my hands. They were still shaking. At the hospital, they pumped her stomach. She was discharged 2 days later with a paper bracelet around her wrist and a prescription for something she never filled. When she walked through the door, she didn't hug me. Didn't thank me. Didn't acknowledge what had happened. She just lit a cigarette and asked, "Did you clean up the glass?" And I said yes. Because I had. Because I always did. That night, I lay in bed and thought about the medic's question. "Do you feel safe at home?" And for the first time, I let myself answer honestly, even if it was just inside my own head, no. Not even a little. But I also knew I'd keep lying. Because if I told the truth, everything would unravel. The family. The house. Me. And I didn't know what was worse, living in the mess or watching it be exposed. At least in the mess, I knew the rules. I knew my place. And I was still, somehow, keeping her alive. I left home when I was 17 and no one tried to stop me. There wasn't a fight or a dramatic scene. No shouting match, no slam doors. Just me, quietly folding clothes into a backpack on a Wednesday afternoon while my mom was passed out again on the couch, and my dad was working late, or maybe just avoiding us, like usual. I had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in my head. I used to imagine what it would feel like to finally walk away from all of it, the tension, the guilt, the constant weight of being the emotional scaffolding for two broken adults. But when the moment came, it wasn't triumphant. It felt hollow. Like I was watching myself from outside my body. I packed only what I needed, a few outfits, a toothbrush, the $136 I had secretly saved over the last year from tutoring classmates, and a notebook with no writing in it, because I hadn't let myself write since my diary was torn apart, but something in me hoped that maybe, now, I could. I taped a note to the fridge. Not because I thought they'd care, but because part of me still clung to the idea of being polite, of not just vanishing without a word. It said, "I'm not angry. I just can't do this anymore. I love you, but I'm not your mother. Please don't look for me." That last line was wishful thinking. I knew they wouldn't. And I was right. I moved in with a girl from school, Lena, whose parents were rarely home and didn't ask too many questions. I told them I was staying temporarily because my home life was complicated. That word, complicated, became my shield. It was big enough to contain the truth but vague enough not to invite follow-up questions. I got a part-time job at a bookstore downtown, finished high school with average grades, and applied to exactly one community college because it felt like something people who wanted a future were supposed to do. I didn't cry the night I left. I didn't even cry the next week. But one night, maybe 2 months later, I sat on a park bench after my shift and watched a mom push her toddler on a swing, laughing, engaged, alive, and something inside me cracked. I didn't cry because I missed my mother. I cried because I never had that. Because my childhood had been a performance of stability on a crumbling stage, and I was still unlearning the script. I kept expecting someone, anyone, to call, to yell, to demand I come back. But they never did. No calls. No texts. No missing persons report. I found out later from my brother, Noah, that they told people I had gone off to college early. A lie that was easier for them to swallow than the truth, that I had walked out of their lives without looking back, and they had let me. And maybe that was the real grief. Not that I left. But that leaving didn't break anything. It just confirmed what I had always feared, that my presence had been more convenient than cherished. I still remember standing in that empty living room before I closed the door one final time, looking at her slumped figure on the couch, wondering if she'd even notice I was gone. Wondering if she'd wake up and panic, or just light another cigarette and go back to sleep. I didn't kiss her forehead. I didn't whisper goodbye. I just closed the door quietly and stepped out into a world that was still terrifying, but at least it wasn't pretending. For the first time in my life, the silence around me wasn't full of tension or dread. It was mine. And it was free. I hadn't planned to go back. Honestly, I thought I never would. But one fall afternoon, at 26 years old, I found myself driving through the neighborhood where everything began. It wasn't a conscious decision, just a wrong turn on the way to a client meeting that took me down a street I hadn't seen in nearly a decade. And suddenly, there it was. The house. The one with the chipped siding and the narrow porch. It looked different, smaller, more fragile, like time had shrunk it the way memories sometimes do. The yard was cleaner, the porch railing had been replaced, and someone had painted the door blue. But I knew that house. I knew it in my bones. I parked across the street and just sat there, staring at it. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly they ached. It was strange to see strangers walking in and out of the place that had once been my personal war zone. A young woman stepped out carrying a toddler on her hip, laughing into her phone, looking effortlessly alive. I wondered if she ever screamed into her pillow at night. If she knew what had happened in the corners of that house she now called home. If she could feel the weight of it, ghosts trapped behind drywall and under floorboards. I didn't get out. I didn't need to. I wasn't here for closure, not really. There was no one inside to confront. My parents were gone now, my mother passed from liver failure the year after I left, my father from a heart attack 5 years later. Neither ever called. Neither ever apologized. And yet, they haunted me every day, in the way I double-check locks, in the way I flinch at sudden movements, in the way I always keep an exit in sight. That house didn't hold them anymore, but it still held their echoes. I thought about the girl I used to be. The one who sang herself happy birthday in a mirror. The one who hid vodka bottles like they were bombs. The one who wrote the truth in a pink diary and watched it be torn to pieces. I thought about how long I carried that shame, that guilt, like a weight chained to my ankle. And for what? To protect people who never once protected me? To preserve an image of family that was nothing but a carefully constructed illusion? I exhaled, long and slow, and let my forehead rest against the steering wheel. And then, quietly, I said out loud for the first time, it wasn't my fault. Just 4 words. But they felt like thunder inside my chest. It wasn't my fault she drank. It wasn't my fault he ignored me. It wasn't my fault the house fell apart while I was still learning long division. I had been a child. And I survived. That had to count for something. I sat up, wiped my eyes, and looked at the house one last time. Not with fear. Not even with anger. But with something closer to pity. That place didn't own me anymore. I had built something better. I had friends now who knew my real birthday. A partner who asked how I was and meant it. A cat who slept at my feet and purred like I was worth something. And slowly, I was learning how to be soft without feeling unsafe. Learning that I could tell the truth and still be loved. That I could be messy and still be enough. I started the car and pulled away from the curb without looking back. Not because I was trying to forget, but because I didn't need to prove anything anymore. I had survived the fire. I had walked through the smoke. And now, I was free to breathe.